In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 more common and dangerous biases I have seen in science. And after watching this video, you will know first, what are those biases about? Second, what are the countermoves to stop them before they happen? And third, how you can extrapolate these guardrails to other areas of life as well. So let's dive in. The first one is Optimism Bias. At the start of a project, everything seems viable. One reason is that early excitement that we feel whenever we begin something new. In the Gartner hypercycle, this early stage is called the innovation trigger. It is that initial spark, a breakthrough idea, a promising technology, or a bold research direction that fuels curiosity and enthusiasm long before results are proven. And at this point, there is very little evidence of real utility, and practical applications are often undefined, but yet expectations skyrocket because the unknown feels full of potential. That is optimism bias, staring at the upside while waving away the downside. Like, for example, I have noticed that I tend to overestimate my ability to complete many tasks and underestimate how much time they will take for me to solve some very complex projects. Another driver of optimism bias is the sheer number of unknowns that exist in the early stages of any project. A funny example is that I once pitched a new metric to my supervisor, which at that time I thought I had invented myself. I planned to include it as one of the key contributions of a research paper that I had, but it turned out that the metric already existed and it was actually quite old. The Yakar index, which measures the similarity between two sets as the size of their intersection, divided by the size of the union, and it was invented in 1884. So I just have the hope for this to be novel and new. But hope is not a research method, and claiming something is justified, true, or acceptable simply because you or others didn't know better is actually a fallacy. And too much optimism is, in the end, a problem because it burns time and credibility. And you may wonder how to avoid it. Well, this is my method. I think it's a good idea to write a pre-mortem for the project. A pre-mortem in this case would be like 10 bullet points describing how this project could fail before even starting. I think this one simple move changes everything because it flips your psychology from blind optimism to a more strategic approach. Instead of assuming things will go well and reacting when they don't, you proactively hunt for failure models before they hunt you. It is a simple mental trick with a disproportionate payoff. Bias number 2 is called confirmation bias, and it is the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information in ways that confirm our pre-existing beliefs, and while ignoring or dismissing evidence that contradicts them. Research shows that this human bias boosts our self-esteem and gives us emotional comfort by making our worldview feel consistent, coherent, and correct. It feels something like this. You have a hypothesis, you dig into the literature, and somehow everything you cite agrees with you. But that is not scientific rigor, that is actually cherry picking. And in science, there are two famous behavioral manifestations of this bias. p-hacking, which is the sneaky practice of tweaking data to force a significant result instead of trying to find in the genuine insights. It creates an illusion for meaningful findings. Like, for example, when running experiments, researchers perform many statistical tests on the same dataset and only report the ones that get the expected significant result. And this is very bad practice. Another behavioral manifestation is called harking, a term coined by psychologist Norbert L. Kerr in this influential 1998 paper. And harking is about coming up with an hypothesis after seeing the result of an experiment. And this is wrong because a scientist is supposed to hypothesize before the data is collected or analyzed. So overall, I believe the situation with this kind of confirmation biases is just getting worse with the smarter recommendation system that we have today. And powered by AI, we are becoming more and more polarized without even noticing, because these systems are engineered to show us exactly what we already agree with. The news we read, the videos we watch, the posts we scroll through, all are carefully tailored to make us feel right. And without realizing it, we end up living inside little bubbles where our beliefs are constantly reinforced and rarely challenged. Confirmation bias is therefore a seed for polarization, which is a big problem. But I'm not going to cover that in this video. I remember that very early in my career, I tested several machine learning algorithms and only reported the ones that performed better than the state of the art, while I was omitting the rest. I'm obviously not proud about that specifically, but I am afraid that actually that is very common in science. Like, researchers often hide the failures or don't mention anything about them. But honestly, a paper with only supporting evidence is not science, it is more like marketing. So nowadays, every time I read a paper and I see like perfect experiments and perfect methodology, perfect results, then it feels more like a red flag to me. But what can you do about it? Well, you can force yourself to cite at least 2 studies which results disagree with yours. You can also include a section called Risk to Validity or discussion, where you write about some of the biases that could affect the accuracy of your results. And if you submit your work to a good journal or conference, I am sure that the experienced peer reviewer will actually appreciate the effort that you made to challenge any pre-existing belief you may have in favor of your own work. Bias number 3 is self-serving bias, and it is what makes us believe that our successes and failures are all about us, our talent, our hard work, our decisions. But the truth is that that's not how the real world works. In academia, you see this all the time. A decade ago, plenty of researchers were publishing papers on natural language processing, and then a few years later, the field exploded with LLMs and powerful models. And suddenly, those papers were getting hundreds or even thousands of citations. Meanwhile, other researchers working on other equally exciting topics like autonomous systems or cryptography, they didn't see nearly the same recognition. Why? Because sometimes success is simply about being in the right place at the right time. But self-serving bias tricks us into thinking that every win proves how skilled we are and every loss is just bad luck. It makes us ignore the huge role that external factors like market conditions, competitions, or simply timing play in the outcome. It is a classic reaction. We get a negative review for our work or paper or whatever, and our first instinct is to blame the reviewer or the person who gave us the feedback. But months later, when we read the paper, we read our work again, we realize that they were actually right, that our work just wasn't as strong as we saw in the beginning. So how do you fight this particular bias? One good way is to build stable baselines and repeat your measurements. Track performance over time and line it up with external events so you can tell whether you're caused a change or if it was something happening around you. And when results shift, before you feel great about yourself or blame about bad luck, you just stop and ask yourself, am I sure this result was only because of me? Bias number 4 is called the sunk cost fallacy, and it is one of the most common traps we fall into in research, in business, even in everyday life. This bias makes us stick with a decision even when all the evidence suggests it is a bad move, just because we have already invested time, effort, or money into it. In other words, we keep pouring resources into something that isn't working simply because we don't want all that investment to feel wasted. But here is the harsh truth. Everything has an opportunity cost. Every hour you spend trying to fix a failing project is an hour you could have spent on something that is actually better, something that actually works. Doubling down on failure doesn't just slow you down, it kills momentum, drains morale, and blocks better ideas from ever seeing the light of day. And I have seen brilliant researchers stick to terrible ideas just because they already spent months working on them. And I have actually done it myself. I remember during my PhD, I spent an entire summer building a complex tool for program analysis. It was doing some pretty advanced operations on low-level machine code, and I was kind of proud of it. But then, in between my research, a new research paper came out describing a similar tool that solved the exact same problem, but with a much more advanced tool and method. And at that point, I should have tried to stop my research and refocus and do something else, but I didn't. I told myself that I was almost there with my tool, that all the effort I put, it would eventually pay off. I refused to change the direction, not because it was the right direction, but because I didn't want to feel like I wasted my entire summer, and that was not a good decision. Fortunately, my PhD supervisor eventually persuaded me to change course. The good thing is that the switch wasn't a setback. I was able to learn something out of this process at the end. So I learned how to make the good tool, and then I reused it for a different and much more impactful problem. So the lesson here is that past effort is irrelevant. What actually matters is the future value of what you are doing next. So how do you can avoid failing into the sunk cost trap? A simple but powerful habit is to reset the clock. Every so often, step back and ask yourself the following question. Given what I know today, is this still the best use of my time? And if the honest answer is no, that's something that you really need to take into account. And the smartest move is often to cut your losses early. redirect that energy towards something that actually has a chance to succeed. And the last bias I want to talk about today is called groupthink. And it is one of the most dangerous ones because it hides behind something that feels good, which is this idea of harmony. Groupthink happens when a group of people stop asking the hard questions like, why could this idea fail, for example? And they do this simply because no one wants to put the rock on the boat. We go along with the majority even when our guts tell us something is off, because disagreeing feels uncomfortable, especially when we are in public. And I think this is kind of a fascinating psychological phenomenon, in the sense that we as humans are wired in our brains for social cohesion. We want to belong, we want to be liked, and we definitely don't want to be the difficult person in the room. And that desire for harmony creates enormous pressure to conform, and it is especially strong for new teams members or junior people who don't feel they have the authority to challenge ideas. And that's why big group decisions can be so risky. The larger the group, the harder it becomes to express a contrarian opinion for someone. And in fact, some of the most productive conversations that I have ever had happen in very, very small groups of 2 or 3 people, where, this kind of more honest disagreement feels a bit safer. And I have seen groupthink play out countless times in meetings with other researchers. Everyone says that an idea is promising, not because they truly agree, but because they don't want the social cost of saying something like, yeah, come on, that is actually nonsense. And then, weeks later, reality finally hits, external feedback is received, or something breaks, and suddenly everyone realizes that the original idea had so many holes on it that it was really very, very bad. I think this is why leaders and managers have a special responsibility to watch out for group thinking. They should create an environment where disagreement is something expected, because silence might feel polite, but consensus without friction is a red flag. So, how can you counter this bias? Well, first, you can make contrarian ideas or dissentiment a built-in part of your process. For example, you can assign someone the role of the contrarian advocate, and in every meeting, the job of this person is to just challenge the idea, even if everyone agrees with it. Then you can rotate that role so that everyone gets comfortable with the disagreement. And always you can start like the discussion in the group with the question like, for example, how this idea could fail. And that is a kind of a simple habit that can completely change the expected outcome. So if there is one single thing for you to remember of this video, that is always asking the question, why will this fail? Because as we have seen, optimism, confirmation, p-hacking, and group comfort all pull your way from chasing reality. And that's all from me for today, and see you in the next one. Bye.